We're never biased, but by far the coolest part of the conference to be, particularly this afternoon, as we're tackling the thorny subject of fake news. Anyone that's followed the US election is well aware what fake news is. It's anything with which you disagree. But there is a wider definition of fake news, which is stuff that we simply is unsubstantiated, is put out there as clickbait, is generated by people who aren't journalists, aren't doing research, and has no backing. That's just my definition, but it's a problem for all of us who are producing what we might call real news, for want of a better word, because it corrupts the market. It clouds the consumer's understanding of where value really lies in news and in content generation more widely. And to talk about that, we've got two great sessions. Our first is entitled Strength in Numbers, Combating Misinformation, Manipulation and Outright Fake News. And to talk to us about that, please welcome your penultimate speaker for this afternoon. So if you've saved some applause, now's the time. The Managing Director of First Draft UK, Jenni Sargent.
Hello, hello. I love an efficient conference that only gives you 5 minutes for a break. That's so disciplined. Well done for getting up, going and getting a coffee and coming back in 5 minutes. That's impressive. Well done also for still being here, end of day 2. Much appreciated. Also tackling a topic that for some of you, you might just be sick to death of hearing about. I mean, fake news has dominated the headlines now continuously for months, honestly months. We've been covering it at First Draft for about 2 years to a very small niche audience of people who considered it to be a problem, and all of a sudden it's exploded. So yes, Jenni Sargent from First Draft. Managing Director is quite a lofty title, which was given to me when we first started as a project of 9. We're still only a project. First Draft isn't an organization. We are a coalition of well-meaning folk that started out in 2015 with 9 founding partners. We're now on 100 partners. We're growing by the day. We get applications from around the world. And really what it means to be a partner is just to demonstrate an active commitment to addressing some of the challenges that are emerging through misinformation and the way that it travels online, or information more generally. I mean, I'll go into the sort of nuance of misinformation and how we are beginning to break it down at First Draft. But fundamentally, everybody wants to help. I mean, this summit, I think, to date has been, lots about innovation and great commercial ideas. Our innovation is for the greater good. No one's going to make any money, but the idea of working together to address some of these major challenges which are impacting every aspect of media, but also every industry, from the science community to the health community, whether it's misinformation around climate change to misinformation around, a sporting event. Like we're approached from all angles, and we're trying to do our best to convene some of the smartest people to actually find solutions. We are doers at First Draft. There's a lot of talking about this issue, and what we're trying to do is actually create solutions. They might not be the right solutions in the first instance, but with enough of us working together, the plan is that we might crack it. So when we launched in 2015, we thought, a charming little website with some resources for journalists would be sufficient. So the 9 of us came together and wrote monthly blog posts using case studies and training resources just about how to find information that emerges during a breaking news event, for example, right through to how you would verify a very complex kind of open investigation that goes on for months around a major kind of story that would not necessarily be told if it wasn't for this online investigation. So we've kind of spanned the whole spectrum. Currently, on the site, you'll find these very short videos, how to use Twitter lists, how to news gather using Facebook Live. They're hugely popular. They're sort of 30-second to 2-minute videos. But what they help everybody do is recognize that in every newsroom now, there should be skilled journalists who are able to use social content to find and inform their stories and help them to investigate those stories and report those stories accurately. And we're still finding, 2 years on, that these skills that should be taught in every journalism school and still aren't, are seriously lacking in many newsrooms. Having said that, it's something that's changing, and there are now entire teams dedicated to social search and social verification, which wasn't the case before. We have that natty little GIF in the middle there. which is simply to show the verification process. All of this content comes in, and then we kind of establish a process which says, do we know who, when, what, where, why, which is the same principles of journalism, and all of these aspects require specific steps for social verification. So it's completely different. In an ideal world, we would pick up the phone and make that conclusion about whether something is true or false. Online, there's many free and easy-to-use tools that will help you investigate the source of a piece of content, the location, etc. I think you're going to hear from Rachel from Storyful, who's one of our founding partners after me, and they are experts in this area, kind of pioneered a lot of these standards. But we also look at things like ethics, because actually handling online content is a really tricky thing to master, whether or not it's appropriate that you should use a piece of content that you find online that the original uploader may have only intended to be seen by 50 of their friends, and all of a sudden, as a news organization, you're publishing it to all of your audience. There are ethical things attached, and also copyright issues. So we try, where possible, to produce kind of handy guides. We have a Chrome extension, because everyone worth their salt now has a Chrome extension. It's not the solution that we're after, but it'll do for the time being, which is a kind of a checklist of all of the verification steps that we recommend. We do live workshops with our partners around the world, and we produce these handbooks and guides. And the most recent thing that we funded is this field guide for fake news, which is the most interesting project, which is basically very, very smart academics who had kind of a sprint recently to try and map the misinformation ecosystem relating to the European election specifically. So they are beginning to kind of gauge the patterns in behavior that we can start to see. Is all this emerging from one place? Is it actually, are there things that we can identify early on that we know make something something to be cautious around? So even using the phrase like "not to believe" makes me nervous, because actually there's a whole range of what we are calling fake news, which I'm going to go into in more detail. But the idea of mapping these patterns, like do they use, do headlines always contain the same kind of wording? Are the domains registered to a certain location? What can we begin to map and identify? And I was sent a link this morning by a colleague from a tool called Mention Map, and they spotted that there were 26 Twitter accounts leading up to the Dutch election that were using exactly the same words and hashtags to spread misinformation. Only 26, not a big deal, but those 26 accounts had a major reach, and it was a very sophisticated, coordinated effort that we were only able to identify by, spotting some of those trends and some of those patterns. So that's a very smart work that's done by people who aren't me, but who I work with. So I want to use this time, I think I've only got kind of 7 minutes or something, but just to kind of clarify how we are talking about misinformation versus disinformation, the difference, why it matters, and what we're doing about it. So misinformation is the information that's false, but the person who disseminates it believes that it's true. And the major problem here is this is your average social media user. They're not deliberately sharing something that is false because they want to manipulate the news agenda and disrupt the voting process. They're just trying to be helpful, or they found something or they've seen something that they consider to be interesting enough to share. And then there's disinformation, which is what I just described, which is a very coordinated, deliberate effort. They know that they're spreading something false, and they're deliberately doing so and creating it in a way that, using tried and tested techniques that all publishers know and are learning, to get people to click on their content. There are these bad actors, for want of a better word, who are using and applying all of those techniques to spread misinformation. So we've come up with this kind of scale of intent, just to show how complicated it is. So at one end, you've got satire and parody. And quite rightly, there are many satirical sites who are up in arms saying, this whole fake news debate means that we're being tarnished because we're being called fake news, but actually we're a parody site, we're satire. Don't lump us all into the same category. But from an audience perspective, what kind of visual signals, when you're scrolling through a news feed, are you expecting every user to click on the About page to read the fact that you are describing yourself as a satirical or parody site? Or is it more responsible now, in this day and age, to have a clearer identifier, which kind of takes all the fun out of it, right? If you have an amusing headline that underneath it says, this is parody or this is satire, it's kind of, it's not so funny anymore. Then, right at the other end of the spectrum, you have the full-on 100% fabricated content, which is terrifying to some of the lengths that some people will go to and how effective it is. And then there's all this stuff in between, this kind of grey area of like just bad reporting, just kind of lazy sourcing and crediting, so that there's a whole team of fact checkers now employed to try and make sense of some of the rubbish that is now circulating online, because there are some people who are under pressure to publish 1,000 articles a day, and quite frankly, they'll write anything that they've seen somebody else write, and that is all feeding into this. And there's an element of responsibility from all publishers to try and acknowledge where the problem lies, and does it come down to just the drive in all of us to put together a catchy headline? Is that actually part of the problem? And all of this is the kind of stuff that we're trying to work through with our partners. This checklist, I suppose, shows us that actually down the right-hand side, our colleagues from Bellingcat came up with these 7 Ps, poor journalism, parody, passion, and then we started mapping those alongside our own criteria. And the reason I wanted to put this up here is you'll notice that we've started to put these visual icons together. Now, these are quite important. They're not brilliant, but they're a start. And as I caveat everything, we're doing something. We just need to make sure that, we learn what works and what doesn't work. But this idea of having a visual language, you have the blue verification tick on Facebook and Twitter. Is it worth now trying to work with the social platforms to say, hey, can we put a little satire, or can we put a little icon that says that something's been fabricated? Because there are now ways that we can very quickly identify if something is false. So how do we help users and audiences see that themselves without having that editorial layer of being responsible for taking something down or expecting the social platforms to remove it completely? This might be, a middle ground just to help people. So with a piece of content, along with that content travels this visual icon or this visual language. What does fake news look like? This is the fake news I think we all are familiar with. Now, I've created these kind of mock-ups of the Hillary incident, Hillary Clinton in the US, when she stumbled towards the taxi or towards her car. And we were monitoring this, and the amount of misinformation that circulated around this, and I say misinformation and not disinformation, because a lot of it was genuine, like, oh, she's got cancer. Oh, it proves that she's definitely an alcoholic. Her stumbling towards the car meant that anybody who had the guts to create a fake news story around that could spread that rumor, and then it's off, and it's traveling, and your debunk can never keep up to speed with how quickly that rumor is traveling, because we're all human, and we all choose to believe the things that confirm our own bias. So, this critical thinking layer of like, oh, we're all too smart, we're not going to fall for that. If you wanted to believe that Hillary Clinton was an alcoholic and it confirms your own beliefs, you're not going to question that headline. You're going to go, absolutely, I always knew there was something. I always knew there was something. So this is a big part of the problem, this expectation of whose responsibility is it? Is it all on the shoulders of the users to be able to spot these very convincing-looking headlines, when normally these headlines have always told them in their head, have always told them the truth? What clues can we give them? What should they be searching for? And can we actually expect them to investigate every single headline and think, oh, I'm just going to apply some critical thinking here and follow these 25 handy steps that First Draft have advised us will help them find out whether it's fake or not? Because you can find out whether it's fake really quickly. The challenge is whether to expect anyone to do those checks, or whether it's our responsibility as publishers to do those checks. So the top one here, the LA Times, this is a famous, it's a very popular trick, which is to become an imposter site, which basically you mimic an already recognized brand. With this one, the LA Times, you can easily swap out the I for an L and in the URL, so it makes the URL look convincing. And almost every newsroom we go into and do training, anyone who's got an L or an I in the name of their publication, you can pretty much check that somebody could buy that URL by replacing one of the letters for like €1 or something. You can easily create an imposter site of most of your own publications, those of you who are publishers. And then all you need to do is kind of, just Photoshop the site so make it look convincing, adding an extra layer for that poor social media user to confuse them. And there's been many, like New York Times have had imposter sites, some of the most established brands, ABC News in the US, they've all been kind of victims of this. And then you have the one to the left, which is, this is just a fake news site that normally, in these examples, it'll say all over the site, we're a parody site, we're a fake news site. Everything we say on this site is absolute rubbish. And their contact email address will be fantasynews@gmail.com. Like everywhere it says, but nobody looks because, you know, who goes to that trouble to say, oh, I'm just going to find out a little bit more? Because normally we see that headline in our social feed. So even if we don't click to open the link, the work of the disinformation terrorists is done. Videos of fake news, videos on YouTube. This is obviously the same example. And someone says, oh, she's collapsed on her way to the car because she was jeered by the crowd. And then, the Twitter rumors start. Oh, what's happening with Hillary? And then again, the rumors start spreading. So all of these icons here, is it feasible to think that we could start to attack, say, oh no, this is because the video's true. If you verified, did that incident happen? It absolutely did. She did stumble on the way to her car, but it's been taken out of context. So how do we inform the users that, we verified the video is genuine, but the context to which it's been reported by somebody in their bedroom who's just done a quick hatchet job and put it up on YouTube. This is, not to kind of be depressing, but this is what we're up against. And then you have the memes. I don't know if any of you heard or listened to the podcast called This American Life. They did an incredible report where they interviewed I think they call themselves the deplorables, and they basically said, we memed Trump into the presidency. We memed him because they were so proud of the memes that they created, that simple idea that we are much more likely to believe something visual than we are words. So even if we eliminate all fake news sites with the traditional format of a banner heading and a photograph and 5 paragraphs of text, don't need that anymore. You just need a catchy image and some white text over the top, and you can spread misinformation. All of that to say, what are we going to do about it? So at First Draft, we launched Crosscheck, which was a seed of an idea from our partners back in November, who said, let's do something around the French election. So we got together on the 6th of January and said, right, the elections are happening in April. What can we do realistically to address this problem? We have now 37 newsroom partners, and the idea is that we all collectively work together to produce this live blog. And the clincher here, which I'll show you in a bit more detail, is that every participating newsroom cross-checks a report that's been verified to endorse the fact that they support that verification process. So each one of these individual reports can be shared socially, and it means that the users have a way of confirming that this verification has taken place, and it adds to that level of trust. The trust in media idea is a major problem. So if everybody's saying the same thing, we monitor, we find stories, we put them through the verification machine. We use Harkin, which was a tool I think that was presented yesterday, to source questions from the public. What are they finding misleading? What don't they understand? What do they think? What rumors are they hearing? That our collective 37 newsrooms work together to report. You'll see here again, these little visual icons are now attached to every single report, and also the multiple logos. We all got together at a chateau in Paris because another really crucial part of this was getting all 60 journalists who are participating to trust each other, because these are competing newsrooms who've never worked together before. So sharing their verification process and flagging to each other that they've identified that something's fake is effectively out-scooping one another. Once they all played table football together and had a good drink, it's been a roaring success. That's the question form. We use Slack. It's a very straightforward way of communicating. You'll see that somebody submits a question, it comes into Slack. One of our project editors, who is a student from a newsroom, puts their little emoji underneath to say, yes, I'm going to take that question and start the reporting process. And then we use a collaborative platform called Check to log the verification process. And then we've created little custom emojis on Slack for each of the newsrooms to then put their custom logo underneath each verification thing, say, yes, we endorse that, we've cross-checked it. And then it becomes this report. I'm horribly out of time, so I can't show you anymore, but it looks all like this. These are some of the questions we've received. And basically, it's something now that has grown. We've received 170 questions from the public. We have the newsrooms continuously verifying all day, every day. And if nothing else, it's helping the users a little bit trust that the media are working together to tackle the misinformation war. Thank you very much.
Jenni, thank you. And just quickly, 2 very quick questions. First of all, how are you funded? Do you accept donations? How does it work?
We definitely accept donations. No, well, we're funded predominantly. One of our founding partners was Google News Lab.
Right.
So they fund the logistics of these operations. What we're trying to do now is stop being a project and start being a non-profit.
And secondly,
officially.
what's the one thing that people here could do to help with this project when they leave?
Definitely promote the question form. I mean, what we're trying to do is now sort of gauge interest. We've been contacted by other countries who are keen to do something similar. So there's interest to do something in Germany, in the Balkans, in South Korea. So, a lot of these systems are very basic, but actually the collaborative side of things is where we're looking for assistance, but also the innovation, because we need to stop just using, third-party tools. We'd love to be able to build something ourselves.
Great. Jenni Sargent, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.